Good afternoon and welcome to Biztech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Rajhi Bank, Malaysia. Jeffrey Halley, Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at OANDA, is our guest today. Jeff, thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
Now, let's take a look first at how crypto markets are performing. At Bitcoin, it's at 20,766.8. It's down 2.21%. Ethereum is at 1,186.9. It's down 2.96%. Looking across to regional stock markets, the SGX is down 0.28%. Bursa Malaysia is down 0.18%. Shanghai is up 0.06%. AXX or ordinaries is up 0.54%. The Nikkei is up 0.33%. The Hang Seng is down 0.69%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up to 0.21%. Now, Jeff, what's your view? Markets are pretty mixed. Tell us why.
Yeah, look, we had a what I would describe as a modest down day overnight from the United States markets. So the Nasdaq fell about 0.9%, I believe, and the S&P was down about 0.3%. Asia, for the most part, seems quite content to follow that. It was a fairly quiet session by recent US standards, and with a bit of a slow news ticker today, it looks like Asia's in wait and see mode. The outperformer in the region today is Australia, where it's being led by resources. Now, we've seen some very strong rises in oil prices again overnight. I think that might have gone some way towards causing the weaker US session, but obviously being a resource-based economy, Australia usually picks up a tailwind in those situations.
Now, Jeff, then what are some key highlights that you've indicated in your commentary today that we should be aware of?
Well, I'm looking at oil prices today. I mean, we've seen a huge rebound in oil prices over the last few days, and oil is up over 1% again today. Reuters was running a story where Emmanuel Macron was overheard speaking to Joe Biden at the G7 conference, where he had talked to the UAE, who had told him they just didn't have any spare capacity left, and nor did the Saudis. Now, that's been semi-confirmed by the UAE officially this morning while we were still asleep, and we saw oil prices shoot higher overnight, move higher again today. Also, Shanghai authorities saying that they've managed to beat the latest Omicron wave has led Asian investors to expect that China's oil consumption will start rising as well. You know, as I mentioned, I believe last week, the futures remained in backwardation, which is a bullish trend, a bullish indicator, even as the whole futures curves moved lower. And so it's turned out to be. You know, while the speculative market may be getting culled out of its long positions, underlyingly here in the real world, energy supplies are very tight. And if Saudi Arabia and the UAE don't have much spare capacity, then they look set to remain tight. So I think we're on the cusp of Brent crude moving back to $120 a barrel again.
Now, Jeff, what I don't understand at this point of time, and break it down for us, is the question of the shale gas producers in the US. Now, they're well in the money at these sort of elevated prices. Why isn't production coming back on stream, especially because shale is something that you can literally turn on and off very easily?
Yeah, it's a little complicated here. There's a few factors at play. One of them is that a lot of them went bust in the boom times, and now they're under much tighter control by their financiers. So that's one part of it. Second one is when you look out at the futures price curves out to sort of 2 or 3 years, Brent crude, WTI are much, much lower than they are in the spot market today, which is probably giving some cause for concern as well. But another part of this is that the US lacks the pipeline infrastructure to shift this oil and gas from where it's coming out of the ground to where it needs to be. And of course, there's bottlenecks in the refining sector as well, which is running at full capacity in the US. I think it's lost over 1 million barrels of refining capacity over the last 2 years, and that's coming home to roost as well. And that's why we're seeing such high gasoline and diesel prices, not just in the US, but around the world. It's a crunch at the refining point, which is flowing back to higher oil prices.
So this is all stemming literally from the underinvestment over the last 5 or 6 years in oil.
Absolutely. Underinvestment in the United States, but not just the United States. When you look at OPEC compliance, it's somewhere near 200%. Now, part of that is distorted by the Russian sanctions, but it was already well over 100% before they invaded Ukraine. That says that OPEC Plus was already pumping as much as it could. And what we've seen there again is that a lot of these countries in the grouping can't even make their production quotas. And that all comes back to this underinvestment in oil infrastructure capacity. Unfortunately, although we do want a green transition eventually, it wasn't ever a case of just flicking a switch and it magically happened. There has to be a transition period, and that meant that infrastructure had to still be invested in probably for another couple of decades. And I think this reality is coming home in no uncertain terms to many parts of the world right now.
And so, and you mentioned, Jeff, that 2 or 3 years down the track, the futures prices don't look as rosy. What sort of numbers are we looking at?
I think I looked the other day. I think Brent crude was around $70, $75. Now we're talking out a few years. We have to remember that when I talk about backwardation in the futures, that means that the price for the spot futures is much higher than the prices for the calendar spreads that go out into the future. So I'm guessing the markets are semi-pricing that the world will return to a more balanced state. But also, I think it indicates that the stress is in the here and the now, and that's why prices are high. But if you were looking at when you invest in energy markets, you're looking over a number of years, even decades, not 1 or 2 years. And so that may be giving them pause for thought when they see those prices looking more normal in the longer dated futures.
Now, Jeff, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
A pleasure. Take care, guys.
Now, we've been speaking to Jeffrey Halley, Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at OANDA, on Biztech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by Rajhi Bank, Malaysia. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as Rajhi Bank's social media platforms. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.